How long was the period of wilderness wandering? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Deuteronomy on Walking Through the Bible.
Of his word, the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, turn to Deuteronomy chapter 2. We're going to be reading from verses 13 to 25. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Deuteronomy chapter 2, beginning at verse 13. Now rise and cross over the valley of Zered. So we crossed over the valley of Zered. And the time it took to come from Kadesh Barnea until we crossed over the valley of Zered was 38 years, until all the generation of the men of war was consumed from the midst of the camp, just as the Lord had sworn to them. For indeed the hand of the Lord was against them, to destroy them from the midst of the camp, until they were consumed. So it was, when all the men of war had finally perished from among the people, that the Lord spoke to me, saying, This day you are to cross over Adar, the boundary of Moab. And when you come near the people of Ammon, do not harass them or meddle with them, for I will not give you any of the land of the people of Ammon as a possession, because I have given it to the descendants of Lot as a possession. That was also regarded as land of giants. Giants formerly dwelt there, but the Ammonites called them Zamzummim, a people as great and numerous and tall as the Anakim. But the Lord destroyed them from before them, and they dispossessed them and dwelt in their place, just as he had done for the descendants of Esau, who dwelt in Seir, when he destroyed the Horites from before them. They dispossessed them and dwelt in their place, even to this day. And the Avim, who dwelt in the villages as far as Gaza, the Caphtorim, who came from Caphtor, destroyed them and dwelt in their place. Rise, take your journey, and cross over the river Arnon. Look, I have given into your hand Sihon the Amorite, king of Heshbon, and his land. Begin to possess it and engage him in battle. This day I will begin to put the dread and fear of you upon the nations under the whole heaven, who shall hear the report of you, and shall tremble and be in anguish because of you. Moses is in the plains of Moab, giving the second generation of Israelites following the Exodus a short retelling of their history here in Deuteronomy. Thus far, we've discussed the trip from Sinai to Kadesh and the rebellion led by the first generation of Israel against taking the promised land, after which God punished them with wilderness wandering. In chapter 2, we have advanced in time to the end of that wandering, which we determined took place around Kadesh. When the time came for the second generation to actually prepare to enter the promised land, God had Israel move south, where they stayed at Mount Seir for a period of time before traveling around the southern tip of Edom and the eastern borders of Moab, as is seen on our map. Israel was told not to take the land of the Edomites or the Moabites, for God had promised those people their lands, with the promise to the Edomites being made to Esau, and the promise to the Moabites being made to Lot. God was going to keep his promises made to these peoples. Coming now to verses 13 and 14, we have Israel situated in the valley of Zered, on our map labeled as Wadi Zered. The Zered River and the Arnon River was the southern and northern borders of the land of Moab. The time it took for Israel to go from Kadesh to Zered was 38 years. Now this number presents us with an issue that needs to be sorted out. God told Israel that as punishment for not taking the promised land, they would have to suffer with 40 years of wilderness wandering. This wandering started in Kadesh. Yet here in Deuteronomy 2, Moses makes it clear that it was only 38 years of wandering. Is there a contradiction? Well, no, but there has to be an answer. Some conclude that Moses was simply rounding off 38 years of wandering in other places to 40 years. But since he was giving a more detailed history here, he needed to be more exact, so he gave the actual number of years. And in truth, this sounds possible, as this is often done by us today when we don't need to be too exact. But when we examine our scriptures a little closer, we find this explanation lacking. In Exodus 7 verse 7, we find that Aaron was 83 years old when he and Moses stood before Pharaoh. And in Numbers 33:39, we find that Aaron was 123 years old when he died on Mount Hor, an event that occurs after the period of wilderness wandering. If you subtract 83 from 123, you get that magic number of 40. So what we find here is that the 40 years of wilderness wandering included the 2 years it took to travel from Egypt to Sinai and Sinai to Kadesh the first time, while the actual amount of time it took for the first generation to die out after rebelling against God was 38 years. Thus, when we use the Scriptures to interpret the Scriptures, contradictions vanish away due to the fact that all Scripture is inspired of God. Once Israel crossed over the Zered River, they would pass by the land of Moab, which they weren't to attack. On the northern border, again, was the Arnon River, which when they crossed over it, they would be in the land of the Amorites. Just to the east of the Amorites would be the Ammonites. Ammon was the other son of Lot, as we learned in Genesis 19. Just like with Moab, Israel was not going to be given the land of the Ammonites because God had given the Ammonites their land by promise to Lot. However, God had not made such a promise to the Amorites. When they crossed the Arnon River, Israel was told to battle with the Amorites and their king Sihon, or he would be delivered into their hand. We covered this battle in Numbers 21, verses 21 to 32, and we will see this battle again, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. But before we get there, we find that God told Israel that from that point forward, he would place dread and fear into the hearts of the nations that Israel would come in contact with, thus enabling Israel to defeat them. How would God do this? Through those nations hearing the reports of what God had done for Israel thus far. And when we get to the book of Joshua and see the story of Rahab, we're going to see God had done exactly that, showing us that God keeps his word. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 26 to 37, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.